Let's talk about mediums for oil painters. There's a few that I always have on my palette. I do keep things pretty simple and uncomplicated, but there's two that I always have on my palette when I am starting or finishing a painting. They do have their pitfalls, so I want to get into that with you, but there's one very popular medium that I have cut out of my practice almost completely, and I want to tell you why and how it might also be affecting you without your knowing. So let's hop in and talk about these mediums. The first one that I love and discovered probably about 5 years ago is Megilp by Gamblin. It is a fixotropic medium, which means it is solid when still but liquid when moving. So what does that mean? It means you can pour it out onto your palette and it'll sit in this little jelly pile or into a cup. It'll sit in a little jelly pile and not run too much. Sometimes if it gets a little unmixed, it will. But then when you dip your brush into it, it acts as a liquid and it just helps your paint glide through the bristles of your brush better, smoother, easier. And if you have a very packed brush, like a mop brush that has very tightly packed bristles, it will help you not have to use an entire tube of paint in order to use that brush. It will let that paint go further throughout that brush. That's why I first found it, was I was using the Mundy mop and in a workshop with C.W. Mundy, and he recommended Megilp. So that's why I use it on my palette. It helps the paint to glide a little bit easier. Some pigments are stiffer, some pigments are more buttery and creamy. Those wouldn't need it, but those stiffer pigments can sometimes benefit from just a little bit more glide. There's some other mediums on the market that mimic Megilp that I was using before I found it, and this is why I haven't gone back to them. So one main competitor, you could say, would be Maroger. I loved using Maroger when I had it on my palette. There's just a few key reasons why I left it behind in favor of Megilp. First, it is very expensive, and second, it's very smelly. And I found myself getting a lot of headaches when I had Maroger on my palette. I will say Maroger is a little bit better. I haven't used it for so many years now that I've kind of forgotten the slight differences. It's just a little bit more creamy and slightly smoother, but it's not worth it to me to have the toxic smells and the headaches that I was getting every time I had Maroger out on my palette. Another similar product, which I'm actually really curious to test out more, is solvent-free gel. And the reason is I'm always interested in cutting as many toxic things out of my painting practice as possible so I can paint for as long as possible with healthy lifespan. And solvent-free gel has, I've heard, well, no solvent, first of all, but then also it's petroleum-free, and there might be petroleum in Megilp. So if you have used solvent-free gel, let me know what your thoughts are about it. I'm about to dive in and kind of explore that more. So the second medium that I always have out is walnut oil. I used linseed oil years ago. I didn't love how it thinned out the paint. When I would use it, it just felt like I was gliding around too much on the canvas and there wasn't enough pigment to go around. Some of that was probably user error as a new painter, but I haven't found the same thing with walnut oil. Walnut oil feels richer, it doesn't feel as thin, it's thicker while still giving you that glide. So why do I have those two on my palette? They just act a little bit differently. Sometimes I just need the tiniest bit of just wetness to add to a mixture just to either help it go further because I only have a little bit of it mixed on my palette and I don't need that much more. And sometimes I need a big glob of the jelly to help the paint go into my brush. So they serve a very similar purpose, but they have little niche differences to them. And the walnut oil also serves a bigger purpose for the medium I mentioned that I don't have on my palette anymore. It kind of fills in there, which I'll get to in a second. I want to touch on the walnut oil a little bit further. There is a type of walnut oil I really enjoy. It's by M. Graham, Alkyd walnut. And the Alkyd in there helps it to dry just a little bit faster. That's one thing I found to be really frustrating about oils when I've added them into my studio practice. They make my paintings take forever to dry. Sometimes I want that, right? Sometimes I want to work on a painting and come back the next day and have those certain passages still be wet so I can caress the edges, work wet into wet. But other times I want it to be dry so that I can start adding layering and texture and color upon color. So I would use Megilp in that instance that I wanted to dry faster, because Megilp dries much faster, or the Alkyd Walnut Oil dries much faster, versus if I want it to dry slower, I would use more walnut. Pure walnut, no Alkyd added. There's two pitfalls of each of these mediums. Okay, Megilp dries, like I said, very quickly. So you don't want to put a bunch out on your palette at once, because it's probably going to not be usable in the next 2 days. In the next day, you'll probably be able to push that crust off and use some of the inside, but you're going to lose a lot of it. So that can be a pitfall. You end up wasting if you're not careful with how much you put out. The second is, if you're not careful and you use too much, you start losing chroma in your mixtures. This is easily avoided if you know that it's possible. Too much Megilp mixed into your paints will make the chroma lessen. It won't be as impactful, and you'll start having more of a thin effect to your paints. If you're looking to be a very painterly painter, if you're fighting a tendency of painting very thinly, you're going to want to be careful using too much Megilp. Same thing with the walnut oil. Now let's get into the very popular medium that I've cut out of my practice almost completely. It's Gamsol. I have used it for years, and I noticed in the last 2 years particularly just a heightened sensitivity to it. So there was a period of time I had a lot of shows going on, and I was painting just very long days. I had a lot of paintings going different places, and every single painting I was hating. I was hating the process of painting them all, and I would be sitting at dinner just thinking, why have I made no progress on this painting today? And I was also having headaches, pretty significantly debilitating headaches by about 3 p.m. every single day. I cut Gamsol out of my studio practice very shortly after that time, and noticed that my occurrence of headaches decreased significantly, and also that inexplainable despair at the easel really lessened. So I will say this, when we are artists that are pushing ourselves to grow, there will be a certain level of dissatisfaction with what we're doing at the easel. That is healthy if you can keep it in check, because it pushes you further down the road. But there's this point that we hit that I'm pretty sure you have maybe been there and you recognize this, where you just stop seeing any of the good things that you have made on your painting, and everything is terrible, everything looks horrible. You start thinking you're a horrible painter. Why didn't you go to dental assisting school like people told you to, etc., 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 and it starts getting really out of hand. I learned shortly after I cut Gamsol out of my practice that it has hormone disrupting capabilities to it. I can't speak to the ins and outs of how, but it can affect your hormones, which have a huge effect on your overall health, but also your mood. I noticed, like I said, significant difference in just that inexplainable despair I was having in the studio, and also the headaches. So I still keep it around for the occasional toning of the canvas I will do. I try to do that outside to keep those toxins limited in my home, and I always keep the lid on it if it is inside. The walnut oil I mentioned had another purpose that filled in for this medium that I didn't keep in my practice. Walnut oil is a little too thick to tone a canvas, but it will make a really nice wash if you're looking for a more washy effect to your paint as you're working and don't want to use Gamsol. So those are just a few mediums that I have on my palette in my studio practice, why I like them, their pitfalls. I'd love to hear what mediums you have and why you enjoy them. See you soon. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this video. If you want to keep the conversation going, please leave a comment below and I will get back to you. And if you're looking for more time working with a model, or you want to paint alongside me and see future paintings develop from start to finish, and also experience artistic community, be sure to check out Broadcasting Brushers. We have 40 artists and more joining from all over the world, painting together live on the live stream twice a month, and it's a blast, and I would love to get to know you better at Broadcasting Brushers. Cheers.